How big will the Internet of Things get? The best way to measure the Internet of Things in the future is to use the world's population. For this, my new company, the Internet of Things, uses the 2020, 5 years from today, as a benchmark. Using United Nations estimates as a base, in 2020, the UN provides a middle estimate of 7.5 billion inhabitants on the Earth. How many of those 7.5 billion will be affected daily by the Internet of Things? The answer is 85%, or 8.5 people out of 10 people, 10 inhabitants on the Earth today, or a half decade from today, that will be how many will be dealing with the Internet of Things. And that 85% of the world's 2020 population is represented by the green circle inside the globe here. Thus, to conclude all of this wrap-up of this slide, 6.5 billion affected daily is how big the Internet of Things will get.
We did some strange things in our country over the years. In the 90s, Europe was way ahead of us on wireless. In the mid-90s, Reed Hunt was chairman of the FCC, and he said in the United States, we're not going to dictate. We're going to let people use whatever technologies they want to use. They can buy the spectrum from us and do whatever they want with it. And as a result of that, the wireless networks you have today are far more robust than anybody else's. But they all have a similar problem. And that is that only one company can operate in spectrum at a time. Yes, you can argue with me and say, well, Wi-Fi isn't like that, and I'll say, yeah, that's true. Anybody can use Wi-Fi, but if you get too many people on a Wi-Fi node, nobody works. And when I look out at the potential of doing different things with wireless technology, and yes, you need fiber for backhaul, but in the end, the simplest, easiest way to bring new stuff to a home is wirelessly. We cannot dig up all the lawns, streets, sidewalks, and no matter what anybody says, you can't afford to do it. Even Google found that out in Kansas City with all the money they have. So I would urge you guys to think about your TV white spaces as a very, very valuable resource. It was given to you 80 years ago by the government. You've done everything that the government ever asked you to do. Try to keep them the heck out of your back pockets, and don't let them fight every chance you get with your congressman to keep regulators from trying to sit back and tell you what to do and how to do it. You've got enough.
For coming today. Cisco is a Fortune 50 company that really was at the dawn of the creation of the internet. And the most simple way to describe our company is we make many of the things that make the internet work. And just as in the several decades ago when we were looking to craft a means to connect more people together, we look at the Internet of Things as yet another example of how we can extend that even further. That this will be a network of networks, a network of people, a network of things. But in many respects, we believe it's actually going to go even beyond that. If you start looking at how we can actually connect those people, things, along with different disparate data sets, as well as the processes necessary to cross-pollinate them all, that this does provide truly unbridled opportunity, not just for broadcasters and service providers, but for consumers, businesses, and governments alike. So while, as Robert said, there are many different estimates as to what the full scope of the opportunity will be, and it's always difficult when you're trying to get a crystal ball to determine the future is very optimistic, very bright in terms of the opportunity, not just to save money, as Jimmy said, but also to make money and to go into new addressable markets of all types. The key is going to be for businesses to recognize this and not to look in the rearview mirror of the business models in the past, but actually through the windshield of the opportunity of the future.
But short answers, what are some of the barriers to entry of the Internet of Things? And again, short answers, please.
Well, the biggest barrier, in my opinion, is access to spectrum. If you look at what happened in the last auction, AT&T and Verizon primarily paid over $40 billion for what was a relatively small swath of spectrum. That allows them to continue to have a virtual monopoly over what happens with most of the usable spectrum. The rest of it's owned by the government, and we need to figure out how to tap that government spectrum without screwing up the U.S. military and the U.S. government, but and there are ways that that can be done. But the real issue I see is spectrum has to be accessible for all kinds of things, and it is a public good, and yes, people should pay for using it, but I think better to have a tax or a tariff on how much of it you use than to do what we're doing today, which just allows too much power to get into too few companies.
Okay, Paul.
Don't you think it's really dangerous to start viewing spectrum as a commodity like oil, gas, gold? Like, if people are gobbling up huge amounts of spectrum because they know that it's a limited commodity, it's not going to be serving the people in the way that it should.
Okay, question.
That,
Let's let Rob start on this.
shouldn't we flip it on its head? And
Real
say
quick, yeah,
it
let me
belongs to the people, not
Yeah.
Well, so let me challenge that. Actually, I respectfully disagree. As George pointed out earlier, by the way, that the federal government occupies, you didn't use this statistic, but it's 80% of the best spectrum, 1,500 megaherts. If the federal government occupied 80% of the best land, we'd have, pitchforks and torches in the streets of
Actually,
Washington.
the amount that the federal government does occupy is quite a lot with BLM.
Out west, that's true. Out in Nevada, maybe they do. So out west, they do, but less so in Virginia, but where I'm from. So I think we need to look at federal spectrum. I think that we need carrots and sticks and sort of a base realignment, the BRAC Commission type scenario to get the federal government to relinquish spectrum. They're not using it efficiently. We don't know, though, because no audit's ever been done because the bureaucracies are so powerful there. And a lot of it is being used for very noble purposes like air traffic control, which I'm going to be taking advantage of here in about an hour. But technology enables us to, in essence, manufacture. So Cooper's law says that our spectral efficiency doubles every 2.5 years. It's related to Moore's law, right? And so we are maybe 8 trillion times more spectrally efficient than when Marconi or Popoff or whoever the heck it was, I'm not going to get into that debate, invented the radio. So that shows you something. So does it belong to the people? Yeah, under the law, it's a public resource, which we can license, we can have unlicensed, we can have sharing. There's a number of ways to allocate it. So let's look at all those different ways. And I'm very optimistic.
Okay, George, some thoughts?
Yeah,